Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Christian Recorder Dialogues. We are indeed delighted to have with us today a very special guest. Before we begin, we encourage everyone to put your church, your district, and your bishop in the chat. Just let us know you're there. But we are excited indeed to have with us today the president of the Council of Bishops of the AME Church, the Right Reverend Stafford J.N. Wicker. Bishop Wicker, welcome to the Christian Recorder Dialogues.
Thank you. Good to be here, John.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. So, as is our tradition with the president of the Council of Bishops, who is the head of the AAB Church, we like to interview you and talk with you over this about your tenure and just get for people to get the chance to know about you, your ministry, and what you will be doing in this upcoming year as the head of the denomination. So, sir, we want to begin by looking at your ministerial career in the AME Church. I know some would consider being the president of the Council of Bishops, the apex. You're at the head of the table. So, tell us where you got your start and how your career began in the AME Church.
My career began with a call of God on my life to be a preacher of the gospel at age 16. And at that age, I barely knew myself, but I knew I wanted to have a call in the Christian ministry through the AME Church.
Mm-hmm.
I remember a particular day of my life, May 20th, 1976. I declared to my parents that I had a call on my life to be a preacher of the gospel. And it was that day that my career in ministry began with the call. I was born in the AME Church, of course, at the Turner Chapel AME Church in Greensburg, Louisiana. And it was the support from that local church, that local pastor, presiding elders, throughout the entire area or the annual conference. I got so much support as a boy child from the local church and from that annual conference. And they directed me that I should pursue my education at Wilberforce University in Wilberforce, Ohio. I did what they told me to do. Mm-hmm. So it was a sense of following the elders and stewards and missionaries and trustees of that local church who helped my parents raise the money to send me to college. So that was really the beginning of my career. On campus, there were AME preachers, 4 of which of us are bishops now. And that truly made a difference, knowing that I was not alone. Always knew that I had no other pursuit to be nothing but an AME pastor and preacher.
Well, Bishop, I think it's interesting that you say here about the fact that the importance of lay people and the elders in getting your call together. I mean, I know that sometimes we talk about, lay versus clergy, but we forget that it's lay people who birth clergy. And so I appreciate that you talked about the role that the elders had in guiding you to where you are. And, that tradition of the boy preacher, that's something I remember when we saw the video in New Orleans, that, you knew very early on that the Lord had something within you. And that says something about spiritual maturity. Sometimes spiritual maturity is not about someone's age, it's about their walk with the Spirit. So it's important that you knew early on what the Lord wanted you to do. What led you to go to Wilberforce? Was it because it was the AME school or because you were sent to go to Wilberforce?
It was an AME school. Mm-hmm. And the people in that local church said to me, if you're going to be a preacher and be in the AME church, you need to go to Wilberforce. Mm-hmm. and there was no other choice. I had no other desire to be in no other school but Wilberforce University. And I began to write Wilberforce, and next thing I knew, I got a catalog in the mail. And there was a young president at that time by the name of Dr. Charles Taylor. And that was inspiring to me. So it was then also a Bishop Cummings, the Bishop Cummings, who was the bishop of my home church and, of course, the 8th District, who ushered that into my heart and spirit, that he was extremely glad that I would leave to go to Wilberforce and welcome me home every Christmas and, of course, every annual conference to answer the conference roll.
Mm-hmm.
Later,
and,
later came right after Bishop Cummings, who was a Wilberforce Payne graduate. And that just made it a no-brainer that was my pathway.
Again, the importance of HBCUs, and we know that Wilberforce has seen an incredible renaissance over these last few years, and I wanted to also ask you, before you were a bishop, you were a pastor, and you've had several important charges that you've held, and some of them you have built from the ground up. So would you walk us through your pastoral career? I know we know where you were elected from, but walk us through some of the highlights from your pastoral career.
My pastoral career highlights really started at the very beginning and at the very pastoral appointment. I had graduated from Wilberforce and went back home. And at that point, Bishop Ming pleaded with me to take appointment called the Turner Chapel EME Church in Roseland, Louisiana. At that time, they needed a brand new edifice. And in 30 months after the appointment, the new church was dedicated. Bishop Ming came to dedicate that church and then gave me directives on my seminary work. And simply me and my family, prepare yourselves to go to seminary, and gave me the privilege to decide where I wanted to go, but yet then turn around and gave me a directive. Where did I want to go? And I told him Princeton Theological Seminary. And he said, no, you should go to Georgia and go to Turner. That kind of shocked me because I thought that he would have said Payne, out of the mere fact he was a Payne graduate. But he directed me to go to Turner and gave me directives, transferred me 2 months after he dedicated the church. I was on my way to Georgia, and Bishop Talbot opened the door. Now, in that brand new church building, it was the first brand new building that had been built for over 40 years.
Wow.
At that time, in that district, in that annual conference.
Wow.
So after that, I went to Georgia, and the pathway looked like it just kept putting me in positions where there were need to build, a need to renovate. I went to South Georgia and did a job with a circuit, they called it then, when you had more than one church. And we did a marvelous 1.5-year journey there. And by that time, the General Conference had brought Bishop John Hurst Adams to Georgia, who tapped me at that point to save a situation that he had a little concerns about over in Atlanta, the Mount Carmel AME Church, and did a marvelous job in renovating central air and heating installation, parking lot development. And just after that, the church changed again and brought Bishop Ming to Georgia, whom I had left in Louisiana. And of course, one of his first moves, he moved me to another situation called a church called Antioch. And said to me at the time he appointed me on in October of 1992. Here is his words. If you handle this appointment correctly, you will never have to ask for another appointment in the AME church.
My.
And it was 24 years later that really became evident. Of that one church, I became a bishop. My pastoral journey with about 4 or 5 appointments.
Wow. And I know one thing I'm glad you highlighted is the fact that you've been known as a builder. I remember in your campaign literature, you talked about, Antioch and the various enterprises and things you had built there. But it's important to remember, I'm glad that you highlighted the fact that you are known for being a hard worker and building things for people. And everywhere you've been, we can see the legacy that's been there.
Yes.
Bishop, moving on, I want to ask you, because again, in your heart, you're a pastor. A bishop is a pastor of pastors. How do you feel the pandemic impact do you believe the pandemic has had on the general church and on your own personal ministry?
The general church, the pandemic has had its impact on the pew, as well as on the pulpit. We've lost lives, many of them that we have not chronicalized in South Africa. We lost a lot of great men and women of God, both from the pew and the pulpit, from the effects of the pandemic. What the pandemic has done to the connection of church is taught us that we don't need a building to call and make it real church. A sanctuary. Sanctuaries, our homes became our sanctuaries. Our technology became our sanctuaries. So God can change your sanctuary at any point in time. I never would have believed if someone had told me what could happen to empty all the churches on an Easter Sunday at any point in time. I never could have. But yes, the pandemic affected the general church at the pew level, at interconnectional level, because we had to alter. God will alter your calendar and your agenda. And the entire connectional church had to alter and make changes. Who would have thought? In our lifetime, or in my lifetime, I would have seen a general conference virtually held with all of our delegations from South Africa. Mind-boggling, transforming, soul-shaking. The AME Church is known for its fellowship through meetings. We know each other through meetings, each other through the meetings. So, plainly put, the pew was changed and challenged. Our calendars was changed and challenged. And our agendas were changed and challenged. But also how we do business changed us and challenged us. We will never be able to do church in a typical, normal way, as we have always done church, in light of technology. Technology, during the pandemic, brought us to a new horizon. And it made me personally seek out young people in my ministry, particularly my two daughters, to help me understand technology. But in that, I found out how powerful technology is and how small it had made the world. I can sit in my car or in my home and communicate with AMEs in South Africa and around the world. Now today, most of the meetings of the Council of Bishops is held virtually. Absolutely phenomenal. And what a shift. Bishops 40 years ago, well, maybe, 40 to 50 years ago, never would have dreamed that the council would be meeting on a computer.
Interesting. Bishop, I appreciate that you mentioned from the beginning of what your response was South Africa, and the fact that in the US, I don't think we really have an appreciation for how devastating the pandemic was across the world. Everything from, I remember we were trying to have the General Conference, and when we were trying to get South Africa to the General Conference, the issue was the vaccines weren't there. The inequity in the vaccines, and also what happened when churches were shut down and how that impacted areas outside the U.S. in ways that I don't think we really comprehended. And, what you said about that challenge us. And I think, we're still a bit challenged because we're still, living with this reality and how the pew has changed. And, the other thing that you highlighted was what's been lost. I think we really haven't grasped with the intellectual loss we've had, because a lot of we lost some elders. We lost some people that still had things to give us, and they're not here, and we're still rebalancing. So I appreciate you for echoing that. And how personally did you cope as bishop? I mean, what are some things that you had to do in your own Episcopal ministry to deal with these challenges?
One, I was assigned to the 18th district, and I was still in the 18th district when the pandemic was at its highest point. And I had annual conferences virtually. I never would have dreamed that I could do an annual conference virtually, but it happened. I made appointments virtually. I mean, that affected me by the mere, I am a people's person. I wanted to be there with the people, wanted to share with the people, wanted to embrace the people and intermingle with the people, but I could not get to my work. So I had to come to grips with having to do my Episcopal work thousands of miles away and call it an annual conference. I never would have dreamed, and I would have imagined. Therefore, electronically wire support. I had to electronically do my sermons. I had to electronically do my business session at 4 and 5 o'clock in the morning or earlier. Matter of fact, it was at midnight. I was doing annual conferences at midnight. I never would have dreamed I'd have to do an annual conference at 12, 1, 2, and 3 o'clock in the morning. But it happened. And I had to adjust and make changes. I had to come to grips with my daily devotion deepened. I got a closer walk with God, not only just because of the pandemic, but my journey to South Africa. I came from South Africa as a changed man. I thought, when I had talked about the saved experience
Mm-hmm.
and being filled with the Holy Spirit and sealed and sanctified by God,
Mm-hmm.
South Africa really made that come real to me.
Mm, 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 mm.
For the poverty level that I experienced and I saw,
Mm-hmm.
where I had to go to the AME churches there,
Mm-hmm.
in the mountains, in the trash pile valleys,
Mm-hmm.
the terrain of where I had to travel
Mm-hmm.
gave me a closer walk with God,
Mm-hmm.
and also let me come to grips with never complain.
Mm-hmm.
And as I often say, if you're pastoring in the AME church in America and you're complaining, I don't have much respect for that.
Mm-hmm.
For what I had to experience and see what pastors have had to experience in my journey in South Africa.
Mm.
That's how
Bishop.
it affected me.
Wow. And Bishop, hearing you say that, I was teaching a course on development, and it's interesting. We talk about poverty and, what being poor looks like, and understanding that, the people that you talk about, in Lesotho, in Swaziland, those high hills, but those people are so full with spirit and filled with praise and gratitude, because they're like, we're not poor. This is just what we have. And with what we have, we are going to be grateful. And so when you say, well, you're only living on X amount a day, don't you know you're poor? They're like, we're not poor, we're blessed. And I think that's something that we take for granted, definitely in the United States, regarding, our areas outside the US and just how we perceive them.
Yes, absolutely. Perception is everything.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're going to take a pause for a commercial break, and after the break.
Thank you.
I am the Reverend Jared Britton Washington, and I am seeking your prayerful support for the office of Chief Information Officer of the African Methodist Episcopal Church. We are grateful that in the African Methodist Episcopal Church, this Chief Information Officer, known as the General Secretary, has a duty to be a bridge builder, to bring together the technologically sophisticated with the technologically challenged, and to navigate how God allows us to affect change, to keep records, and to make certain that the AME Church is accountable on all levels. And so, my brothers and my sisters, I am grateful for the opportunity to present myself to the AME Church. I know that when God gifted me, God made me to be a man of God who loves God's people, who understands promptness, who understands accountability, who understands the ability to be objective in all scenarios and situations, and who loves the spirit of enthusiasm. I am grateful that God has blessed me to be presented before great men and women of God, and I am grateful for the various gifts that God has given me over the course of the years that I have lived this life. Continue to pray for me, pray with me, and know that God is going to bless us in this journey, because I don't just believe that the best is yet to come. I believe the best is right here now, and greater is on the way.
And we're back. And I know Dr. Washington is one of your sons in the ministry, Bishop. And when we told him that we were going to be interviewing you, he said, well, I have to be a part of this and I have to help sponsor this. So we are glad to have him there with us. So, Bishop, let's talk about your goals right now and your tenure as the president of the Council of Bishops. Tell us about, this position that you have in the church, and what are the goals you want to do in this year-long term as the head of the AME Church?
My goal is perhaps twofold. One is to move the Council of Bishops to lead the way to solve the ministerial annuity challenge for our retirement services. We should lead the way as bishop. And we hope that during my tenure, that we will bring a resolution to the upcoming convo in 2023 and to present the absolute resolution to solve our challenge and our issue at the General Conference and moving forward. But it is in 23 that I hope to lead the church to resolve that one issue.
Mm-hmm. You know, you are the third president of the Council of Bishops that has had to deal with this issue. And I remember when Bishop Beifel and I did the interview, she said she did not expect to be in the chair with this. And Brailsford said the same thing. But as a pastor first, and as a bishop, you know, and of course the bishop of the 8th district, where, you know, we have people, you're seeing servant retirement. You're seeing people turning 75, and we still have this annuity albatross hanging around our necks. How have you helped your pastors to cope with the situation?
First and foremost, by being prayerful and benevolent, generous with what I have and what the 8th district has. And from the very bottom of our souls, to try to share with them that the church has not forsaken, and to help them to come to understand that even in the midst of this, you can still trust God and you can still trust the church. Mm-hmm. It has been those two pieces, a spirit of generosity from me and the 8th district, and also a spirit of helping them to understand that they can still trust the church by continuously supporting church and supporting the new program that we have put in place by the Department of Retirement Services, and that the old and the new together, we will try to make our employees as whole as we possibly can at 100%. It is hopeful, and the church has to remain hopeful. We as children of God must be hopeful that we're better than what they say we are.
Mm-hmm. And I know that the word trust, that is something that's been shaken to the core within our denomination. I'm a part of the annuity program. You're a part of the annuity program. And to know that someone who was my colleague did these things. And, you know, I've heard people say, you know, I will never trust the church again. I will never do X, Y, Z again. How do we get people to trust the denomination again?
It's a laundry list of things. First of all, get people to lean on their faith. And trust is built in stages. Mm-hmm. Faith, keep working at it, keep doing your part, and be faithful over that which you have yourself. Mm-hmm. Case in point, I had to remain faithful. I had to run for this position 3 times. I've never ran for anything 3 times, but I did. I never ran from anybody 3 times, but I did. I was faithful to believe that it was the place where God wanted me, and that The election process was not going to discourage me. Lack of support from others were not going to discourage me, because I knew who called me. Remember, I just got through talking about earlier? I remembered who called me. And that same God will take care of you. That same God will walk with you through your journey, because this is a faith journey. And I have faith in God. I have faith in myself. I have faith in my church that at the end, it's going to be all right. And I simply say to everyone listening, from the seat I sat, be faithful. We will make this okay.
Bishop, I appreciate that you remind us that two things. We are people of faith, and our ultimate service isn't to the church, but to God. And God has never abandoned those who serve God. So thank you for those words. And I hope that they will bring comfort to those who are listening. We've all gotten our statements saying what we are owed, and we are trusting the church to make good on that promise. As part of becoming president of the Council of Bishops, there's the Investiture celebration, and we've been in New Orleans 3 times over the last, I think, 15 years. We were there for 2008 with Bishop Guidry. We were then again with Bishop McAllister, and you were the 3rd time in New Orleans. Now, your investiture had rave reviews, from the Zulu band to Supervisor Wicker's amazing dress. What were some of the ways that you sought to make the investiture uniquely yours?
About 18 months out, I set my family down, and when I say my family, my wife and 2 daughters. And simply said to them, we have to host a general board, an account meeting, and there I will be invested as president of the council. And I said to them, I want to restore back the tradition of my church. I want to go back and show that what the mothers and fathers did was sacred, and in and of itself, some things belong to the AME church mystique. And that it was one thing clearly in my mind, how much our people left those meetings talking about how beautiful things were. Here are the 3 things that I wanted to make sure happened in investiture. That the people would feel warm, wanted, and welcome. Not only to New Orleans, but to the AME church again, after a pandemic, after a scandal, that we could still hold it together and come back once again and simply say, this is really who we are. So I think we did okay, because I have not heard one complaint. And how in the world can you bring that many people and that many AMEs together and complain? I think everybody had a ball.
Yeah, I do have one complaint. I wanted some more of that food, because I really enjoyed. That was probably some of the best investiture food we've had in a while. So I that's my complaint. I want a little bit more of what we got, but it was colorful, and I think we take for granted that was the first in-person investiture we had. Well, we had Bishop Byford's investiture, and we were still kind of coming out of the pandemic. And then we had Brailsford's. This was like the first time where we really could have the family together without the COVID testing, without that hanging over us. and it was for a different field. It was a different field because even in Atlanta with Bishop Brailsford, there was still this hesitancy. There was still this thing, and the hotel even was not clearly wasn't prepared for us. They were still a first staff, half staff. So it was a good feeling in New Orleans, and I just want some more of the food because it was
Okay.
it was good food.
Take your trip there and you enjoy yourself.
Oh, you gonna see me at some point before the 8th, before long, Bishop, before long. But I one of the things that you didn't at the Investiture was you brought in I believe it was the Democratic gubernatorial candidate for Louisiana, and looking at where you sit in your district right now, you have Louisiana, Mississippi, which are two places in this country where Black people are having every possible right attacked. In Jackson, Mississippi, we have issues with the water, issues with the state legislature trying to take over literally the city police. And Louisiana, you have the state outright trying to rob Black people of another congressional district. So how have you dealt with the struggles of Black people in Louisiana and Mississippi during your tenure as their leader, as the bishop?
First and foremost, I try to deal with it from a spiritual realm. Is that every time I get up, I try to point my audience toward the future and preach messages of inspiration and encouragement toward the future. And might I add, Mississippi has one of the highest elected Black men in the state of Mississippi in the Department of Transportation, who is an AME member from Cleveland, Mississippi. It is also a lot of African Americans particularly in Mississippi, are still elected to local municipal elections, judgeships. Sometimes you can't always let the history of a place continue to decide its future. Yes, it still has to come a long ways in Mississippi and Louisiana. But there are a few spotlights of hope. And over in Louisiana, who would have thought Louisiana would have ever had a Black man to be of the Democratic Party or a major political party in a state like Louisiana? Almost unbelievable, but it is today. And both are on the ballot. The young man in Mississippi and the young man in Louisiana. And as I speak, I would ask everyone, encourage everyone for voter participation, voter education, voter registration. It makes all the difference in the world. Still today, our power to vote. Teaching the next generation, this generation of young people, teaching them how hard it was for us to get the opportunity to register to vote, be a participant in voting. When you don't vote, you don't have a voice. That has been my particular encouragement of the people and citizens of Mississippi and Louisiana. Also, the ecumenical community. I'm a member of 7 major denominations.
Wow.
We meet weekly, and we are plugged into this election, particularly the Louisiana election. I don't think that everything is red as you might think it is, and there is still hope at the ballot poll and at the ballot and in the polls.
Mm, mm. Well, wow, Bishop, and we just saw in the Capitol recently with this issue with the Republican Party, we are seeing that elections do have consequences, and
Absolutely.
elections do have consequences, and
Yeah,
elections do have consequences,
yeah, as well
and
as you see it.
and voting can't be taken for granted. I appreciate your message of hope, even in states where we know clearly there are orchestrated attacks to suppress and repress and depress Black turnout, that people still need to show up and support. I appreciate that message, and we can't forget that Mississippi is also the home of Hiram Rhodes Rebels. It gave
Yes,
us Fannie Lou Hamer, and
yes.
so we have to keep fighting and remember that resilience is part of that DNA. Thank you for that, Bishop. I appreciate that. Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir, for that. We're going to go to our final commercial break, and then we're going to come back with some more questions before we wrap up.
Thank you.
Pain has a personal touch that they add to the theological education. It's not that we just get you there and educate you and send you on your way.
It has really developed me in my expanding of my mind, my thinking process, my thought process. It really helped me to grow and how I debate, how I view things.
Tearing up about it now because it was a journey. It was very hard. But having those professors and those mentors and that family experience believing you, to journey with you and to know that they believe in you, I don't think you can get that somewhere else.
Now, we didn't have a Wilberforce commercial, but we found somewhere from the 3rd District to show you. And we know that Amy Hurst Anderson, who was in that, has 8th District roots, the new presiding elder of the Columbia, Springfield, Zinnia, Ohio District. So Columbus, Springfield, Zinnia, Ohio District. So Bishop, as we move to close the interview, you're taking us as President of the Council of Bishops into the 2024 General Conference. So, you take us into 2024, and then Bishop Reed will take us into General Conference. So, where do you see the church in 2024 when you leave office? And what are your hopes for this next General Conference?
Where I see the church, I would hope that the church can see a united church. We are one. In terms of how the Council of Bishops work with one another to achieve a common goal. There's always the segment of the Council of Bishops being divided into 2 and 3 divisions.
Mm-hmm.
It is my hope that we can make united in the next few months to simply say we are one,
Mm-hmm.
and that we can work together for the common good of all who are concerned. That's one. Number 2, we are one. That we could have a great appreciation for our international global footprint
Mm-hmm.
in districts 14 through 20. And being able to bring them to the conference this time in a unique and uniformed way, that they can experience what we experience as Americans, the real, true, wonderful feel of what it means to be an African Methodist Episcopalian, to be able to say to the world church, we are one.
Mm-hmm.
That the bishops in Africa are just as important to us as anybody else, or those elected as Africans are just as important as anybody else. That our membership in Africa is just as important as anybody else. We are one. That there are no little districts and there are no big districts. That we are family, and that we can't continue to select all of our leaders, just particular districts in the life of our denomination. That the selection process in the life of the church should be broad and intentional across the spectrum of our church to give a sense of broad perspective to the church, and not just in a few corners of the church, and not just by a few names in the church.
Wow. Wow.
I hope if it's any one thing we can do is to teach our church that we can no longer be so small, but we're bigger than our smallness. And that our church is large enough, no matter what corner of the world you come from, you can also serve the church no matter where and what. That we will select you if you're qualified. We'll not only select you, but we'll elect you, even if you're from Louisiana and Mississippi. Let's say amen.
Amen. Well, Bishop, that is some powerful words about the equality, who we are as a church. My godmother, Jamie Coleman Williams, always used to tell me that AMEs in our heart, we are a fair people. And fairness means that we have to go to places that have been overlooked or that have not had the representation they have. And we know that the 8th district and many of our areas of 14 through 20 have not had the Episcopal leadership elected from their districts that they should have had. And we hope that that is something that we can do better with in these next few quadrennia, starting with 2024.
Here is something else. I think it's very effective for us.
Mm-hmm.
We represent all kinds of people from all walks of life.
Yes.
Not just the educated, not just the silk stocking, not just the North, not just the West, but we are a combination of people who have and have nots.
Mm-hmm.
The less intellectual. We need everybody. And every time I put together an annual conference program, go down and get some of the little preachers and put them on program. Go down and get the least of these and put them on program. That makes a healthy, strong church.
You know, Bishop, and I forgot to ask this, but I'm glad we're still here. So for the first time, connectionally, we celebrated Juneteenth together as a holiday. And we did that in Union Bethel. And you picked one of the quote unquote little preachers to be the preacher when Bishop Byfield, she wasn't able to attend, and you said, we can provide the preacher. What was it like having that Juneteenth service in Union Bethel and being a part of that there as the incoming president of the Council of Bishops?
We were at the citadel of African Methodism in, first of all, the 8th district, one of the places that the AME Church has to call out when we look south, or we look at the 8th district. And in the city of New Orleans, one of the largest Black cities in the country.
Mhm.
I mean, really, for Black folks.
Mhm.
It is the place where a lot has started and begun. A lot of great talent come of New Orleans. And it's no way in the world, well, it really was the birth of the Social Action Commission of the AME Church that really sprung the idea. And I led the 8th District in the Juneteenth celebration a year in advance into the city of Jackson. Was so timely because of the water crisis in Jackson. But when we come to a city like New Orleans, a Black church in a Black city, on Juneteenth Day celebration, it would have been absolutely overlooking the fact that our heritage and our foundation must be celebrated. And that made the Juneteenth one of the starring crowns of the General Conference, not the General Conference, but the General Board meeting and the Council of Bishops meeting and the Investiture service, having it that particular day and weekend and week made the difference, which I did not think to mention it when you raised a question to me earlier. What made my investiture unique? Juneteenth is a time when we can reflect and restore and renew our commitment of being people of color in this country.
And I'm glad that the first time we were able to do it connectionally was at Union Bethel in New Orleans, a very, like you said, an important place for African Methodism and for Black people as a whole. Well,
Yes.
Bishop Wicker, we're coming up on our hour. So, sir, we thank you for the time you spent with us. We know you're in conference season, so I'm glad we could pull you from the chair briefly to chat with us. Do you have any final words, sir, that you'd like to leave with our viewers before we wrap this up?
Yes. It's to my church, to the African Methodist Episcopal Church. As a kid born in a rural area to uneducated parents, to people who just loved me and loved their church, the AME Church has given me an opportunity. It will give you an opportunity. And so I say to you, don't get discouraged in your walk, in your career in ministry. Don't give up on the church and don't give up on God. Those of you who are hearing my voice, be faithful. Always remember to see the church as the whole and not in part. Our church is at a crowning moment of growth and development. We can grow again. We can live and thrive again. In too many places, we're just surviving, but we can thrive. We must take our church to a level of thriving for winning souls, first and foremost. Let's go now with fire in our belly and in our gut to go win souls for Christ. Let it be your motto every day your feet hit the floor if you're in ministry. That day's motto be one more for Christ. As the council's president, I take on this 1 year's journey as president of the council, leading the way to simply say, one more for Christ every day. If we all do it together, we will never have to wonder what our future will look like. For our future is as bright as the sun. God bless you, my family.
Your Grace, thank you for those words. And everyone, thank you for watching this evening. We will see you next time on the Christian Recorder Dialogue.